very good evening to you, and thank you very much for making time and tuning into Brand Plus TV. It's always a delight knowing that you have taken your time and have decided to keep us company. I am Ondiro Ganga, ready to bring you up to speed with all the top stories making headlines, and as you know, we're all about business. Let's take a look at some of those stories in the headlines today.
Is to find the constraints that which we have actually identified under our
Kenya-Germany Technical and Financial Cooperation Agreement placing a bet on the NSE. East African Commissioners General press briefing upholding accountability.
I think the debt refinancing, that's clear. I mean, if you're going to have to say, for instance, we borrow money when...
Kenya's debt burden, getting the message out. Welcome back and thank you for staying with us. Now on to our top story. The Kenyan and German governments have successfully concluded bilateral negotiations on the development cooperation program for the next 2 years, valued at $110 million. This was marked by Cabinet Secretary National Treasury and Planning Henry Rotich and the German ambassador to Kenya signing off on the outstanding government agreements on technical and financial cooperation valued at $340 million. Take a look. Speaking at the event, Cabinet Secretary National Treasury and Planning Henry Rotich went ahead to expound on the funds allocated to the Kenyan government, the agreement the government has signed with the German government, and where the funds will be allocated.
The funding available in the Kenya-German Development Cooperation for the coming period amounts to 104 million euros, about 12.5 billion Kenya shillings. I therefore look forward to signing the technical and financial agreements for 2018 and in the future. So what we have signed today is really just a framework agreement on how there's the commitment of the Federal Republic of Germany to assist Kenya in various development areas that we have discussed with them. But the specifics of what will be funded will be signed subsequently under these agreements that we have signed today. So I'm pleased that we have signed at least for the technical and financial agreements for the 2014 and 2015 and 2016. I must say this has delayed. We should have signed this long time, because there was a long period of negotiations to agree on some text, and I'm glad that now we have agreed and we have signed all the agreements for 2014 all the way to 2016, and that now unlocks the funds that had been committed over this period. Some are ongoing projects, some are yet to be fully disbursed, and we will be discussing and realigning those that we have not utilized to align them to the Big Four agenda.
Thank you. Pleasure.
German ambassador to Kenya, Annette Gutner, on her part pointed out that the German government is proud to be part of Kenya's development, stating that it's their hope that the funds will be invested in the interest of Kenyans.
We're very proud to be able to contribute to the development plans of Kenya with these funds. I'm also very happy to say that we, as our Kenyan counterparts, are very much focusing on supporting the Big Four agenda and the MTP3. And I would also like to thank the government of Kenya for the recent Development Partners Forum and for the very constructive dialogue that we had, where we indicated challenges that we have to overcome, but also indicated together where the main focal areas are and where the development partners can come in with their help to support the Vision 2030. Now, as you said, the signing has been done, and now we have to work hard to specify the areas where we will put the money and start with the implementation of our commitments. I would like to thank our Kenyan counterparts for the trust and the commitment that has been shown in our talks in the recent days and weeks. And I'm very also happy that you indicated that the funds that were allocated will be implemented in a transparent and accountable way. This is very important for us too, that the funds are invested in the best interest of the people of Kenya.
Among the areas that the funds will be channeled into is the Big Four agenda. CS Rotich said special focus will be paid on health and the actualization of universal health coverage.
And I think the bigger thing will be really the universal health care, which will obviously consume a lot of resources going forward. This financial year, as you know, we are doing the piloting in 4 counties. By the end of June, we will have known what does it require to actually provide affordable health care in those 4 counties. And then the next subsequent financial year, we will now roll out to the rest of the counties, and that will now mean that the budget for health will obviously increase. And as you know, we have already set up the fund for that, which is the Sports, Arts and Social Development Fund. So that is the fund, and of that fund, almost 60% will be going to universal health care.
With the President's key focus being the Big Four agenda, short-term goals that the government is committed to implement for the realization of steady economic growth and development, this gesture by the German government goes to show belief in the 4-point agenda, all the while bringing it one step closer to actualization. The East African Commissioners General today held a press briefing where they outlined the issues discussed during their 45th East Africa Revenue Commissioners General meeting in Nairobi. Our reporter Daisy Wambo was present and brings us the story.
Revenue authorities have adopted more innovative approaches.
Kenya Revenue Authority Commissioner General John Giraini highlighted some of the issues discussed during the meeting that led to the signing of the communique by the East African Community countries.
Second semi-annual meeting. Every year we have 2 meetings as Commissioners General with our teams to discuss issues that affect our operations, to discuss how we can cooperate better, how we can coordinate our activities as important organs that are meant to ensure the success of the East African community.
He went on to emphasize on the need to leverage on IT so as to come up with a proper system of managing taxes.
There was a general trend towards the greater use of technology systems for taxpayer management and compliance enhancement in both customs and also in managing domestic taxes.
While they noted growth in revenue collection, the Commissioner General emphasized on the need of the revenue authorities to adopt more innovative approaches to drive taxpayer recruitment.
Growth achieved in revenue collection for the first quarter of financial year 2018-19, with growth rates ranging from 5.3 to 17.8%. To deepen revenue mobilization, Revenue authorities have adopted more innovative approaches, including the use of third-party data to drive taxpayer recruitment.
He further outlined what the revenue authority systems need to do to effectively facilitate trade and enhance compliance.
1. To develop a common customs management system to replace the independent systems in use at the individual states. This will enhance information sharing and help prevent cross-border fraud. Secondly, to acquire capacity to develop our own IT systems instead of relying on external ICT developers. This will help revenue authorities to have better flexibility in system management and also in cost management. Third, to acquire source codes for existing systems so as to reduce costly maintenance.
On matters corruption, the revenue authorities needed to:
First, to enhance capacities to investigate and punish acts of corruption by employing more investigators and training them in forensic investigations. Secondly, to institute lifestyle audits and establish frameworks to transparently select cases for lifestyle audit interventions. And third is to strengthen prevention of corruption by focusing on business and technology reforms.
The Commissioners General through the country host emphasized the need to come up with an electronic East Africa Community Customs Valuation System that will enable the benchmarking of cargo and goods.
Revenue authorities agreed to speedily implement the electronic EAC Customs Valuation System that enables value benchmarking of various goods based on valuation data that is gleaned from national customs declaration systems. Customs administrations shall also coordinate research aimed at enhancing their common cargo valuation database.
The Commissioner General went on to state the need for them to focus on tax harmonization within the region.
The primary purpose of harmonizing internal tax systems is in order to remove distortions, as we have said in the communique. Because when you have distortions, for example, say if you have significant differences in the way you apply, say, VAT or income tax or pay as you earn, that is going to have an impact, because then you introduce internal competition, because then maybe an investor might then feel, if I go to country X, I can have access to a tax rate of 15%. If I stay in country Y, I will be paying 30%. That starts defeating the essence of having a common market. Because in a common market, you're meant to be competing on the basis of competitive advantages.
In a current globalized world, better trade environment is indispensable to attract more investment and trade into the region. At the same time, there is need to deal with illicit trade through effective monitoring and control. For Brand Plus TV Business News, I am Daisy Wambua.
Well, on that integration note, let's head for a short commercial break. But do stay with us, as we still have so much more lined up for you on the other side, including matters national debt. Do not miss that. Welcome back to the most comprehensive exclusive business bulletin in the country. Now on to matters Kenya's national debt. Kenya might not yet be having a debt crisis, but it's crystal clear it's suffering from debt stress characterized by borrowing expensively to finance cheaper loans. These sentiments were echoed by economists during a policy breakfast on Kenya's debt burden organized by African Media Hub in conjunction with the Strathmore Business School. Take a look.
They have to play the long game, and they have to make the...
Over the last few years, Kenya's rising debt has been a point of discussion in most macroeconomic outlook discourses, with organizations such as the World Bank, the International Monetary Fund, global credit rating agencies, and the African Development Bank, among others, raising concerns. It is for this reason that today, the conversation revolved around Kenya's debt burden and if there's a reason for Kenya to be concerned. Kwame Owino, CEO, Institute of Economic Affairs, went ahead to say as much as Kenya is not in a debt crisis yet, all the red flags are pointing towards debt stress.
I think the debt refinancing, that's clear. I mean, if you're going to have to, say, for instance, we borrow money when our Eurobond or when our main debts, syndicated loans and all those became. So from the first Eurobond alone, the first Eurobond alone, part of the proceeds actually was used to pay an earlier debt, right? Which is a syndicated loan and everything else. So that's what we do. Now, that in itself is not a bad thing. To take a cheaper loan to pay an expensive loan is not a bad thing. Except in the last two cycles of our Eurobond, every time we've borrowed, we are borrowing at a more expensive rate to pay a loan, that's whatever. So that in itself is already early signs of debt stress, in the sense that you have to make your obligations come through, but the only way you're doing that is borrowing more expensively to pay for a cheaper loan. That's not the way it should be. It's the reverse, which is what tells me that we shouldn't describe this as a crisis, but we're already in a situation of stress where government is actually borrowing expensive loan to pay others.
Strikes our financial budget, because that's when a lot of that shifting happens.
The same tone was picked up by Nzese Were, a development economist, who pointed out that Kenya's debt woes are because of its poor financial credibility, making borrowing for Kenya tougher.
So I think we need to really work on strengthening our institutions, but also understanding that there are just some things that will take time, and sadly, we can do what we can, but I think other countries have shown us. I think in terms of refinancing, I'm not very optimistic. I'm with Kwame here. I think given the fiscal credibility issues Kenya has, no matter where they're going for the money, the terms are going to be a lot tougher. It's going to be a lot more expensive, and the tenure is going to be shorter. I think that's why, even if you see in Kwame's presentation, people don't want to hang on to government debt for a long time. They just don't. And that's why you're seeing shorter and shorter tenures. So as long as government demonstrates that it's having serious problems with fiscal management, it will be very difficult to get cheap loans in a long tenure.
We'll have more money as we get more money.
Nzese further went on to say that it will only get easier if Kenya resignals its fiscal policy.
That will only change when there's demonstrated reorientation of fiscal policy and there is signaling to domestic and international market that it makes sense to hold on to Kenyan debt. So until that fiscal credibility issue is managed, I don't think government will have a way of that. I think in terms of the infrastructure and the multiplier effect, I think that's an argument that Asia has used. The revenue generation is not growing at the pace that government wants.
Most of the debt accrued by Kenya is always channeled into infrastructure development. However, Kwame says not all debt-funded projects have been successful, hence stalling the expected multiplier effect.
I mean, the government itself has to admit that not every infrastructure project that we've invested in the last even 10 years has been successful. I mean, the Thika Road, the Thika Superhighway is an outlier in Kenya's infrastructure development. One, it was developed, the costs were fairly modest in all factors considered, and yes, it's led definitely to some positive things, but there are other infrastructure things. So for instance, the last mile. I think if you hear, whether it was the Jubilee Manifesto or more recently you hear that Kenya expanded power to 4 million new homes, and while we did that, Kenya Power faced losses of income, and some of the 600,000 people who were connected to power did not pay their bills at the end of the month. So if you had that as an investment, obviously the returns on that investment tells you that maybe you could have spent the same amount of money for a different purpose and got that. So it's clear. Some of those are things we're going to have to live with. Those investments are not going to pay off in the immediate time.
Thank you for your insights.
And Zese equally stated that not all infrastructure projects translate into economic development, since most projects are overpriced and characterized with misappropriation of funds.
The reality is that if the project is overpriced and the money is not used efficiently, that multiplier effect will not materialize. So I think the assumption that infrastructure equals growth and development is a fallacy, and it actually prevents government from being responsible to deliver what it should be delivering. Growing at the pace that it should be growing at. So I think looking at revenue.
Kenya's public debt is projected to hit 7 trillion by the time His Excellency President Uhuru Kenyatta exits State House. According to a report by National Treasury Cabinet Secretary Henry Rotich, the country's debt burden will hit 5.6 trillion Kenya shillings by June next year.
Unless there is something buried.
The annual public debt management report was tabled in the National Assembly by Leader of Majority Aden Duale. Further shows that the national debt as at June this year, both domestic and foreign, stood at 5.1 trillion Kenya shillings. Domestic debt stands at 2.5 trillion, while foreign debt has hit 2.6 trillion Kenya shillings. The country has equally received 559.1 billion Kenya shillings from China, 101.9 billion Kenya shillings from Italy, and 34.7 billion Kenya shillings from Germany. Other creditors are Belgium, who issued 10.2 billion Kenya shillings, and the USA 2.9 billion Kenya shillings. International Development Association IDA has also contributed to the debt burden by loaning the country 516.8 billion Kenya shillings. African Development Bank has extended a 204.8 billion Kenya shillings facility, while International Monetary Fund IMF has given a 71.6 billion Kenya shillings loan.
When we concluded
With the ever-growing concerns of the country debt sustainability, what remains is for the concerned stakeholders to take decisive action before the country plunges into an economic crisis.
100, 200 billion worth of spending every year.
Ernst & Young, the largest professional service firm in the world and among the biggest 4 accounting firms today, held a press briefing at their offices, and here is that report.
I'm Celestine Munda.
Speaking during the presser, Celestine Munda, EY Consulting Leader East Africa, pointed out the need for the government to have an organization that supports its objective in the Big Four agenda.
As you all know, the Big Four agenda is quite an aggressive program covering a wide range of issues, starting from housing to health to food to manufacturing. And if you look at the scale of those programs, it requires sizable organization to support the government in meeting those challenges and in executing those programs.
Okay.
She went on to state that the organization was giving a platform for people to acquire the knowledge and gain skills that are needed to deal with financial challenges faced in various sectors.
It also gives us the scale we need to respond to other challenges that other sectors are facing in financial services, in the area of energy, consumer products, as well as telecoms.
As the government works on achieving the Big Four agenda, it is quite prudent for it to have a multi-sectoral approach, creating a formidable support system that will see the realization sooner rather than later. For Brand Plus TV Business News, I am Daisy Wambua.
To help all these SMEs have the right skills, the right capacity.
Let us now take a look at how the markets performed today. Here is a summary. Well, that is just a summary of how the markets performed, but for more in-depth analysis of the same, tune in on Monday morning at 8 a.m. for my next big bet with Rachel Nderitu and Karanja Daniel. Let's now take a look at the day's weather report. Well, that was it from the Business News Desk. On behalf of everyone that made it a success, we say a big thank you for watching. Not to worry, you can catch us again on Monday, same place, same time. But until then, keep thinking business, culture, lifestyle. I am Ondiro Ganga, and as always, I'm in business. Case closed.